Hey, good morning, church. It's great to see you, and I want to just add my congratulations to the three young ladies, Bree, Presley, Peyton, that were baptized this morning. And it was just awesome to see these young ladies be baptized, and it reminded me, and thinking about all the kids that grew up in our church and where they've gone, what they've done. And I was out greeting some folks this morning, and I met a young girl that grew up in our church, and she's still a young lady, but she has her own family and children now. And so I got to see, I call her Katie Beam. She has another name, Katie Pritz. I never really got used to it, but Katie and Kevin are here. Where's Katie and Kevin at? Are you in here? Stand up, Kevin. But Kate, stand up. We want to say hi. Stand up, Katie and Kevin. And all right, give them a nice welcome. But just as two things. Kevin, stand up again. Katie, keep standing. I tell you. He's actually got another title. I'm going to call him a general, but he's going to tell me it's something else. Kevin, what's your rank in the Air Force? Colonel? Colonel? Is that right? All right. Thank you for your service. And so Katie and Kevin have traveled all over the world. I've watched them when they visit, then when they're here, raising their family in the faith and in the church. They're taking their... Eli, stand up. Everybody say how big you are. All right? Look how big Eli. Eli is headed off to Oklahoma State, one of my favorite cowboys. All right. Thank you. And so, thank you. It's always great to see them. And when, people that grow up in our church, from small children in our youth group, children's youth group, marry, go off to college, raise their family, come back for a visit, or many of them stay right here, which is great. It's always a great blessing for a pastor. And so let me tell you, in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from today, the 28th, not only are we having baptism that day, but Rob Morgan, who is personally my favorite author, great speaker, is going to be with us again. And he'll be speaking and teaching from his newest book, The 50 Final Events of World History, and an overview of prophecy of the book of Revelation. And that's going to set us up as we head into the fall and midweeks after Labor Day. I'll be doing a teaching from that book and from the book of Revelation as we come back for that. So you might just keep that on your radar. Plan to be here, obviously, in a couple of weeks to be part of that. So Mark chapter 6 is where we're going to land here in a few minutes. Mark chapter 6 is a series that we've been spending really the better part of this year, early spring and coming all the way through to summer and the fall, just kind of verse by verse, chapter by chapter in this great gospel, fast-paced gospel, the Gospel of Mark. So there's a question I ask almost every day, and the truth is I really do ask this question every day. And the question is, what's for dinner? And of course, I'm usually asking Donnell that question. And it's interesting that simple little question, what's for dinner, can cause such anxiety and stress. Usually, the conversation goes something like this. I ask what's for dinner. That's followed by another question. What do you want? When you probably can finish out the conversation. I say, I don't know. What do you want? And she says, I don't know. You choose. No, you choose. And usually we come up on some mutual understanding about dinner. We always are able to resolve the question, what's for dinner? Now, the truth, it's never a question whether we're going to be able to eat or not. I'm never asking, are we going to be able to have dinner tonight? No, I know we're going to have dinner tonight. It's just what we will be having for dinner that evening. And I'm very, very grateful for that. Because I know there's lots of people all around the world and right here in our own community that what's for dinner isn't really what they're going to have. They just don't even know if they're going to be able to have it. And I'm thankful that's not the question for us. There have been times, and there are times in our lives, and even in my life, that we ask other questions. And we ask these questions often. What are we going to do? How are we going to get through this? Will we be able to pay for this? Are we going to make it? We all ask those types of questions. These are questions that we really are not able to answer. Now, we're not able to answer those types of questions because we don't have anything or any way to meet the need, to address the crisis or the problem we're facing. It's too big. It's just too big and beyond anything that we have. There's no way we can do that. And we ask the question, what am I going to do? How are we going to pay for this? Will we get through this? And that is sort of what we find happening when we get to this part of the Gospel of Mark, Mark chapter 6, beginning in verse 30. And what we find there is a massive miracle. Now, you might think all the miracles are mega miracles, and they are in a sense, but I think there's something about this miracle that is just spectacular in its sense. One reason I say that, it is the only miracle, other than the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that is recorded in all four of the Gospels. So besides Mark chapter 6, it's in Matthew chapter 14, it's in Luke chapter 9, and it's in John chapter 6. We just commonly refer to it as the feeding of the 5,000, this miraculous feeding of the multitudes. It's a story that we learn as children, but it is not just a children's story. It is an incredibly important, you might say, adult story to be reminded of. The fact that it's recorded in, I think, all the Gospels speaks to the significance of this miracle. And this miracle, I think, more than any other miracle, confronts us with the reality of Jesus' deity. In other words, only God can do what Jesus does. Only God can do this. Remember those three most important words of the human language? Jesus is God. And I think in this miracle we have a clear demonstration of who Jesus is, and we learn something about him. So let's just jump right into it this morning. Mark chapter 6, verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and all that they had taught. To set it up for you, Jesus earlier in the chapter has sent the disciples out two by two. Now they're on their own. You might say he's sending them out on a ministry expedition, multiplying himself 12 times over. Now you go out and do what I've been preparing you to do. He sends them out to do this ministry. He's prepared them even when they face rejection by his own rejection in his hometown of Nazareth. We also have seen last week that news now has come about the death of John the Baptist, who's been beheaded by Herod Antipas. Herodias wanted his head, and she got it. That may have shut down or at least shortened the ministry expedition that the apostles were on. The news of the death of John the Baptist is such news of magnitude that they all go back to regroup with Jesus. So they are reporting to Jesus about their ministry. The sick are being healed. Demons are being cast out. Even the dead are being raised from the dead. Plus, there's the death of John the Baptist. So this is all happening. They come back. Verse 31 says, then because so many people were coming and going that they didn't even have a chance to eat, Jesus said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place of solitude. Let's get some rest. We're tired. Physically, emotionally, probably even spiritually. And so they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. So you fill in some of the details that are given to us in the other Gospels. They're probably right around Capernaum. They're going to go over to a place that's less populated on the northeastern side of the Sea of Galilee. It's about 4 miles across the Sea of Galilee by boat. It's about 8 miles around by foot. And so these folks, and the young and the young and the strong, take off running. And of course, the crowds are going. They get there. That's about 8 miles. They're floating around 3 miles, but they get there. They get there ahead of them. And when Jesus landed and saw the crowd, he had compassion on them. Why? Because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So what does he do? He begins teaching them many things. Now, by this time, it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it's already very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. And so Jesus answered, you give them something to eat. It's really a command. You give them something to eat. What's for dinner? You give them dinner. Well, how are we going to do that? And Philip's doing some fast calculations. We know he's sort of the accountant being counted in the group. He said that would take more than half a year's wages. Literally, he says that would take 200 denarii, a day's wage. It would take 6 to 8 months. And I think he's just pulling out a number that I don't even think they have that money. He said it would take more than half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? You can almost hear the tone of a little disrespect that's coming. So Jesus says, well, how many loaves do you have? And we'll fill it in a moment, but you know the story. He says, go and see. Andrew finds a little boy, and he comes back with the only sack lunch they seem to be able to find in the crowd of thousands of people. And he said, well, we've got 5 loaves, and we got 2 little fish. That's about it. That's this young boy's lunch. And so then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. Now hold on to that for a moment. They're on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. It's not a desert place. It's an isolated, solitary, remote place. It's a beautiful place. Green grass sloping up the mountainside. They're sitting down now, taking a probably unruly mass of people, organizing them in groups of hundreds and fifties. Reminiscent, going all the way back to the Old Testament and the first 5 books of Moses. And Jesus is establishing himself as the second Moses who was greater than the first Moses. You begin to see the picture playing itself. And so the shepherd has the sheep sit down in the green grass. And that's what they do. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, Jesus looks up to heaven and he gave thanks and broke the loaves. And then he gave them to the disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. And so this is a massive miracle that's taking place. They all ate. And really they all ate and they ate and they ate until they were really satisfied to the point they really couldn't eat anymore. And then the disciples went and picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. That's interesting. Didn't have anything, now they got 12 baskets full, 1 apiece. And then Mark goes ahead and tells us here that the number of men who had eaten was 5,000. And we know the other gospel accounts let us know there weren't just men there were women and children there. Conservatively speaking, there were 5,000 men. Probably another 5,000 to 10,000 women and children. On the conservative side, 10,000, but really, realistically, you could take this thing up to 20,000, 25,000. At this point, it doesn't matter. There's a whole bunch of people that are there from all the surrounding villages that are around there. Not only that, We also know from the other readings of the gospel that it's the springtime of the year and the Passover. Pilgrims are making their way to Jerusalem. There's a lot of people that are traveling through, going to Jerusalem. And so you have all these traveling pilgrims that are going up that add to the crowd. They've got a massive crowd of people there. And when you take all four gospel accounts, you begin to sort of paint the picture of what happened that day. So every day I ask the question, what are we going to have for dinner? What do we have for dinner? It's a simple little question I can answer pretty quickly. But the truth is, almost daily, I ask a couple of other questions. You probably ask these questions too. And so almost daily I ask this question right here. Does Jesus care? Because something will happen that I didn't expect would happen. Something is painful that I'm experiencing that I don't want to experience. Something happens that I think I don't really deserve this, but I'm getting it anyway. Something happens that's way beyond really, I think, should be happening to me. Don't you care, Jesus? Don't you care? And almost on the heels of this question rolls out the second question, can Jesus do anything? Can he do anything about it? He tells us to pray and to ask him, Lord, this is a real problem. It's not a multitude in the thousands that I have no idea how I'm going to feed. It's not a dinner party that we've got that we haven't got anything to feed them. Now this usually comes on the heels of a phone call, a meeting with family, something at church, something is so overwhelming. It is something that is beyond my ability and my resources to do anything about. And I wonder, can Jesus do anything about this? Is he able to do anything about it? And so we have this miracle. And this miracle speaks to us even today more relevantly than ever before. And so the 12, they come back from this ministry excursion that they've been out, and they have news about their ministry. John the Baptist has been beheaded. The crowd is gathering because news of Jesus has traveled, and the multitudes are great. And when Jesus saw them, they began to move quickly, where it says they didn't even have a chance to eat. I don't know if on that little short boat ride, the disciples, got to catch a quick snack. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. But they're going, they're getting ready to go take a well-deserved rest with Jesus, following their ministry that's taken a lot out of them, plus the grief of death of John the Baptist. Jesus invites them to come. And it's not the point of today's message. It's such a wonderful invitation for all of us to remember. Come with me. Come with me, Jesus says, by yourselves. And there's times that we go with Jesus by ourselves to a quiet place, an isolated place, a solitary place. And let's get some rest. And Jesus wants us to have these times of rest that follow these times of ministry and work, you might say, to be renewed. So he invites them to come to this place, but we know that it doesn't stay a solitary little retreat with Jesus very long. It's not even that at all. It comes to be something else. And so I want to give you today's three answers to those two questions. Does Jesus care, and can he do anything about it? Does Jesus care about your problem, your concern, your hurt, your need, your worry, your anxiety, whatever it is? And can he do anything about it? And so here's part of the answer, the first answer. Jesus cares about you and all of your needs. Sometimes it's just good to get recentered on that. Jesus cares about you and all of your needs. And so what happened? Well, we read in verse 34 that when Jesus landed, he saw a large crowd. And he had, and if it just stopped right there, if he just sort of stopped right there, he had, well, you could kind of finish that sentence any way that you might imagine if it were you. I'm going on vacation. I'm getting away, and you get this call back from work, or a family member calls, and there's a problem. And you might say, well, he had anger. He was frustrated, exasperated. He was put out. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, we know in the thousands, he had compassion on them. Now, why did he have compassion on them? Because what he saw were sheep without a shepherd. And so he did what shepherds do. He began to meet their needs and to take care of them. And so Mark says he began to teach them. Luke says he began to heal the sick that were among them. And so what's happening is that he's healing those who are infirm. He's teaching spiritual truths to them. He didn't see this as some great interruption, some unwanted intrusion. He saw this as an opportunity, and he had compassion on them. And this word compassion is a strong word in the Scripture. It's a word that gets right down. The Greek root of the word is viscera. It means that he had this strong feeling, emotionally, even physically, within his gut. He saw them, and he felt their pain in the pit of his stomach. He had compassion on them. Why? He saw them as sheep. In my imagination, I can sort of see the green hillside pastures there, green grass, and maybe they're wearing some white robes, even white headdress. I think they might even have an image that reminded him of sheep physically. They had the look of sheep dotted all over the green grass and the hillside and the countryside there. They were sheep without a shepherd. And he began teaching them. Sheep without a shepherd. Now, we know what that means. Sometimes we use the phrase sometimes, but basically it means these are sheep that are lost. They're wandering aimlessly. They don't know where they're going. They don't know how to take care of themselves. They have no one to feed them, no one to lead them, no one to take them to water, no one to make sure they have food. There's no one to provide shelter for them. There's no one to protect them from wild beasts, much less the elements. There's no one to clean them when their wool becomes matted down and they're overweighted with just the debris of dirt and filth they're picking up. There's no one to care for them. And ultimately, they're going to die. They're going to suffer and they're going to die. They're sheep without a shepherd. And Jesus is moved with this great compassion upon them. 9 times in the New Testament, we read about Jesus having this deep compassion. And you do a little Bible study on that. It always involves someone who is ill or suffering the other painful effects of sin. And he's moved with compassion. Matthew 14:14 tells us, when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and he healed their sick. He begins addressing the needs that they have physically and spiritually together. He begins this healing and this teaching that's taking place. They are physically and spiritually in need. So here's a question that you might just want to think. I was thinking about this, and it was the question I just sort of asked myself this week was, how do you think Jesus sees you? How do you think Jesus sees you? Or maybe to phrase it another way, What does Jesus think when he does see you? What do you think that he thinks when he sees you? And when he looks at you, do you think he is looking at you with a spirit of condemnation? Or how could you do this again? Why did you get yourself in this mess? You're not worth anything. If you were good enough, this wouldn't happen to you. Or is he looking at you with a shepherd's heart and eyes of compassion, and he's moved? Does he really care about you? I'm going to tell you he does, because he is the great good shepherd who will leave 99 to go after one. He cares about his sheep, and he cares about you. So there's a second answer to those two questions. It's Jesus is able to meet all of your needs. Jesus is able to meet all of your needs. And I think this is where the story really begins to mean something for us today, because we read it's late in the day. We know it's Passover, it's springtime, the crowds of pilgrims making their way. And the sun sets about this time of the year in Israel, probably around 6:30 p.m. So we can just imagine, they've been at it all day, and it's probably 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The disciples come to Jesus with a real problem. And they say something like this: Jesus, this is a remote place. There's really nothing to eat here. It is late in the day. The sun will be setting. You look at this crowd here, Jesus, and there's got 5,000 men. There's the women, the children. And they come with the problem. And the truth is, I think they're hungry. I think they're hungry, and I think they're just a tad bit irritated because their little retreat, day off, vacation, just got ruined by all these people. I think they're kind of in a bad mood, is what I think. Because I probably would have been in a bad mood. This is not what I had planned for today. This is some alone time. This was me time. And you're bothering me. And so they come to Jesus. Here's the problem. This is a remote place. There's nothing to eat. It's late in the day. These people are hungry. And they do something that in many management business books, they tell you that's really a good practice. And this is really what people in management and leadership, when you bring a problem, bring a solution. I'm still working that one out because I don't know if that's always true, but you'll often hear that. You've probably heard it maybe in some training you've been. If you're going to bring a problem to your boss, why don't you bring him a couple of solutions too? So they bring a solution. There's the problem. Here's the solution. Send these people away. Send the problem away. Let's get rid of the problem. And I want you to know something. This is a verb that is a command. They're telling him what to do. Can you imagine? They have the gall to tell Jesus, send these people away. They don't even want to discuss it with him. Here's the problem. Nothing to do. Send them away. They're telling Jesus. I'm so glad none of us would ever tell Jesus what to do. I'm just glad I've never told him what to do. Because I usually tell him what to do about everything. Hey, Jesus, this is the problem. Let me tell you what to do about it. And usually this is how you can do it. And this is the timetable. And it's usually now. They're telling him what to do. John's account tells us that Jesus asked Philip, so Philip, how are we going to feed these people? Where are we going to buy bread for them to eat? And so somehow Philip just responds, we don't know how to feed them. But this is what it says in John 6:6. He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. He just asked Philip, how are we going to buy bread for these people to eat? Now, Jesus already knew what he was going to do. This is a little test for Philip. Philip's got no idea. He kind of flunks the test. The reason he flunks the test and all the rest of them flunked the test is they did not see 5,000 people in need. They saw 5,000 problems One massive problem that they could not do anything about and solve. That's what they saw. And they just wanted it to go away. Like most of us do with all of our problems. We just want it to go away. This is what they didn't know. This is an impossible situation. We don't have money. We don't have power. There's nothing we can do. What they didn't know was, can Jesus do anything about this? And so the human solution to this problem is, let's just get the problem out of sight. They're telling Jesus, tell them to go away, Jesus. And for Jesus, he saw this as a marvelous opportunity. I was thinking about those words of Paul in Ephesians 3:20. And I love it in the Message. God can do anything, you know, far more than you could ever imagine or guess or request in your wildest dreams. It's a wonderful verse, Ephesians 3:20. It's a wonderful verse when things are going well in life. We cling on to this verse when things aren't going well, and we're just hoping, with what little bit of faith we can muster up in the face of a problem, this is true. Because we know if it's not true, we got nothing. Is he able to do that? And so that brings us to the third answer to the two questions, and that is Jesus wants to use you to help meet the needs of others. Or I might say, Jesus wants to use you to meet your needs and the needs of others. And so this is how it begins to unfold. So Jesus answered their command with a command. So Jesus comes back to, Jesus, we command you to send them away. Jesus says, I command you to feed them. You feed them. You give them something to eat. And that's when they respond, there's no way, half a month, 200 days' wages, there's no way. Are we going to spend that much money? And I wish we could really hear the tone of sort of sarcastic disrespect. How many loaves do you have? And we know that Andrew did the surveillance. He comes back with the little lunch. Well, they said, we've got 5 and we got a couple of fishes. But he adds that, what are they among so many? I mean, that feeds one little boy. We got thousands of people here. It wouldn't have been great if Philip, as he's calculating, stopped for a moment and maybe responded with something like, Lord, I've seen you turn water into wine. I've watched you heal the royal official's son from a distance. I saw you heal the man who'd been able to walk for 38 years. I've watched you perform dozens and dozens and dozens of miracles. Surely, this is not too hard for you. You can provide food for this hungry multitude, even as God provided manna in the wilderness for our forefathers. And of course, I like to think that if I'd been there, that's what I would have said. Because I would have somehow been able to respond that way. But the truth is, I know in my heart, I'm just like Philip, Andrew, and the rest of the 12. Lord, let's make this problem go away, Lord. It's too big for me. I'm afraid it might be too big for you. Because I don't have enough of anything to meet this problem in my life. I don't have enough of anything. No food, no money, and my faith is dwindling down. Moving on, Jesus is sufficient. He is more than able to meet all of our needs. And that's remarkable to me. Jesus had options open to him. He could have just miraculously filled their stomachs, and they just take the hunger away. He could have done that. He could have turned the stones on the countryside fields into bread. That would have been great. He could have called down manna from heaven. Wouldn't that have been awesome? Remember Moses? Hey, Moses, send down some manna from heaven here. That's not what he did. He did it this way. What do you have, no matter how small it is, give it to me. We are inadequate to meet our own needs and the needs of others. And what we want to do is to turn our back, send it away, not do anything about it, where Jesus says, what do you have? Lord, I don't have really anything but this little mustard seed of faith. And so he says, just start with what you have. Give it to me. Give me what you do have. And obey and do what I tell you to do. Trust me in this matter. And so the people group up, and the disciples begin to distribute the miraculous multiplication of the bread and the fish. They're participating in some way in the miracle. We're not really sure how it was taking place. In the hands of Jesus, in the baskets of the disciples as they're passing it out. But what we do know, we're like the disciples in this sense. We are to be distributors and not manufacturers of God's mercy and grace and power. And we are especially not to be hoarders of His blessings. So they begin passing out, meeting the need. And so we read in verse 42, they all ate. Everybody ate. And they all ate all that they wanted. They're satisfied. And that word literally means something to the effect, they're gorged. This is the reason I think they're gorged. Because they're people and they just eat and they're hungry and they just eat till we're gorged. I think it's a little bit more than that, because this is what, from personal experience, if I'm eating something that is extremely good, that I've really never tasted anything as good as this before, I eat it till I'm gorged. They've never tasted bread like this bread. Oh, this fish. Have you ever had fish like this? I've never had fish like this. I've seen fish like this, never tasted this good before. And then the disciples go, after all have eaten, and they pick up 12 basketfuls. And this really refers to the word that means like a backpack that all the disciples, all the people would carry in that day. They carry their daily food in that backpack. And so they fill up their backpack for their daily food. Again, that's quite a powerful object lesson that they have right there. All 12 of them looking at their 12 backpacks filled with food. And so here's the point. Maybe what the Lord spoke to you today is that Jesus uses people who give what they have to Him to meet their needs, you might say, and to meet the needs of people. And that's how Jesus has chosen to do it. And whether or not we want to participate in that or not really becomes a decision of faith. Will I participate with Jesus? Or do I want to choose to hold on to it? How am I going to face this problem that I have? Impossible is not an excuse for doing nothing. Impossible is not an excuse to shut down and do nothing. It really becomes the motivation to trust God with what you have and give it all to Him. And so let me just close with this. I think this massive miracle is a reflection of maybe the best known psalm. I think this is a Psalm 23 miracle. It's a psalm. It really is just a picture of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd. I don't know where my food's coming from, where my water's coming from. I don't know where I'm going to rest. I don't know. But the Lord's my shepherd. I don't have any wants. I've got the shepherd. He's taking care of that. He makes me to lay down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. Now, I don't have to worry about my enemies. He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. He's taking care of my enemies. If I get hurt, He's going to anoint my head. He's going to bring healing to me. And I'm going to dwell with Him in the house of the Lord forever and forever. He's the great shepherd. He's the bread of life. If you've never eaten it, you'll always be hungry. Always. You'll always be unsatisfied in life. It's only till you eat the bread of life you have no more needs that you're concerned about, because the good shepherd is taking care of them. I'm going to ask you to bow with me as we pray. And the fact is, if you've never trusted Christ as your good shepherd or as the bread of life, that is the greatest need in your life. I can tell you now, it doesn't matter what need you walked in, that is the greatest need in your life. And if you trusted Christ, I encourage you to offer yourself and what you have to Christ to help meet the needs of others that God wants to meet through you. Father, there is no problem that is too big, and there is no person that is too small. You are the bread of life. You are the good shepherd. And I pray for every person as we walked in, it's one of the big questions. Do you care, and can you do anything? And we know you do care. And you're just waiting to do what only you can do in all of our lives. And we ask this in Christ's name. Amen.